Oh, this is where I do the intro. Hang on. Guns, martinis, gadgets, and golden guns. We are full tilt boogie into the Roger Moore era. Things are very blue, and yet there are no sharp corners. I know nothing of the book, and yet I am curious. Also, Kat and I will revisit our previous Bond rankings. But before we go any farther, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that tonight we review The Man with the Golden Gun. I am Scotty. My opposite number, Catherine, is here, and Steve has provided Tabasco. Hey, Kat.
Hey, Scott.
What's going on?
Yeah, not much. Just finished watching the film.
And how many billions has No Time to Die made?
Oh, not a one yet. It's
not a one?
667 million.
Damn it.
But it is open in Australia this weekend, so it'll probably make some good money.
I got a notification on my phone that said it was available on Amazon Prime in Canada for $24.99 for early access.
It is. You can get it here on Vudu and Amazon Prime and use stateside for $20. Well, that's a rental, a 24-hour rental type thing. But
right. I'm tempted.
I'm not because it's it's 6 weeks out now. Just one day shy of 6 weeks out from the Blu-ray.
Right. And speaking of Blu-rays, I cannot tell you the amount of effort that I went to see The Man with the Golden Gun.
Yes, tell yours about it while I grab a golden gun. Tell them the story real quick.
It's kind of, no, there's a triumph at the end, and I shall. Thank you, Kat. I appreciate you passing the Tabasco. Yeah, I have the Blu-ray box set, and I put in the disc for The Man with the Golden Gun on the Blu-ray player, and wouldn't work at all. Looked like it was pretty scratched. I don't know how to replace an individual disc for a box set, but it looks like I'm going to have to buy an entirely new box set. Hopefully it shows up in 4K, at which point I won't have to buy any more James Bond Blu-rays. I'll just have to buy an entirely new entertainment system, television, player, surround sound system. It sounds much more feasible than spending $10 on a Blu-ray.
Yeah, because the Blu-ray will probably be pricier than that.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Regarding a potential 4K box set, I really doubt that they're going to be, and sinking the money in to do 4K scans of the film negatives, because they didn't do that
for which? Sorry.
A 4K box set of the first 4 Daniel Craig films, like last year or the year before. But they didn't do 4K scans of the film negatives. They just upconverted to 4K from a 2K digital intermediate, meaning that it's not as good as it would look. I mean, Skyfall notwithstanding, because that was shot digitally. The other 3 could have looked a lot better on 4K if they had done that, but they didn't. I haven't seen those 4K transfers yet because I just have the Blu-rays, but that's fine. But
there is a 4K coming.
That's what I said. Maybe it depends on if MGM wants to do that for the 60th anniversary.
If Amazon wants to do that,
well, they've already had 4K digital copies of the first 20 films on Prime for 6 years now.
Well, and also when I rented, I didn't rent it in 4K. I rented my copy of The Man in the Golden Gun in just high definition.
Yeah, Blu-ray.
Yeah. And also, I was not a big fan of the Amazon on Amazon Prime Video in Canada, considering my, video provider, my internet provider. I wasn't really all that impressed with the audio delivery.
I watched a review today about the digital No Time to Die 4K review, and they were mentioning that because it's digital, you have like the little artifacts, compression artifacts, and the darks with like blotchiness and stuff like that. And it's like that's why I really don't like digital copies that much. Like I remember when I first got Disney Plus a few years ago, I had slower internet, so when I was watching The Mandalorian, anything that was not in focus in the shot would be kind of blurred or blotchy and blocky. It was just like really bad. And even though I got great internet now, watching it, you still get some of those little artifacts in the back because you have all the compression issues. Which maybe if it was just in simple HD, you wouldn't have that. But which is why I'm a big fan of physical media, as you can all see.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a big fan of physical media as well. And that's why I was very disappointed that I didn't get to see this particular film in, in Blu-ray compression and everything. Also, one of the things that I found very interesting from the Amazon presentation is that at the opening moments, it has a rating, and it was rated 7+, which I found rather strange because this is the most risque of the James Bond films that I think I've ever seen so far. In this particular, like, if you were walking in what year did this come out, Kat?
December 20th, 1974.
1974. I think that this is beyond its time. We talk about things being of its time. This is pushing the envelope for 1974. Had you ever read the book?
Yeah, a long time. I read all his books a long time ago.
And how did you, in terms of the comparison of the novel or short? Is it a novel? Is The Man with the Golden Gun a novel?
Yeah.
And how do you feel it compares to the film?
Well, I think the one thing it does not have going for it is Scaramanga, because he's more or less a thug in that he doesn't have the veneer that Christopher Lee brought to the character. And even Christopher Lee opined that when he read the book. In fact, Fleming had actually wanted Christopher Lee to play Dr. No, but by the time he thought about it, it was too late because Joseph Wiseman had already been cast. And of course, Fleming knew Christopher Lee because they were cousins and they would golf together. So that was Lee's opinion, that the character, and he's right, the character from the book wasn't really that great. And most of the story took place in Beirut and around there in the Middle East in the novel, which was not possible at the time they filmed this because of the Yom Kippur War and other things. And so they decided to, and they couldn't go to Vietnam, and so they decided that we'll go to Thailand.
Why? What was happening in Vietnam in 1974?
Oh, I think you can take a wild guess.
Some American war, I'm sure. Anyway, yeah, no, I was just curious. Like, I am an aficionado of Fleming's works, and I've read some of the books, but I haven't read all of them. But I was just wondering about the comparison between the film and.
A little interesting tidbit is that it was the last Fleming Bond novel.
Really?
Yeah, he died after that. I think he died actually before it was published.
James Bond or Ian Fleming?
Ian Fleming. He died before. Yeah, because it was like 60s. So.
Okay. Well, interesting. Like, I do have it. I have it on my iPad, and I'll check it out. And so before, would you like to revisit our previous ratings?
I would.
Would you like to do that before we talk about The Man with the Golden Gun?
Yes.
All right. Well, in everyone joining the channel, welcome to the Fantasmagorium presents Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns. This is Kat. She is an expert. I am an enthusiastic amateur, and here are our ratings of James Bond films that we have looked over in our last episodes. And how many episodes? As many James Bond movies as I'm about to list. So, Diamonds Are Forever. Kat gave it a 2. I gave it a 2. I stand with that. Spectre. I gave it a 5. Kat gave it a 4. No Time to Die. Kat gave it a 10. I gave it a 9. Skyfall. Kat gave it an 8. I gave it a 4. Quantum of Solace. Kat gave it a 6. I gave it a 3. Casino Royale. I don't know what happened on that episode. I scanned through the whole dang thing. What did you give it? I was wasted on that episode. If you would like to see me wasted, go check out the Casino Royale episode. What did you rate it?
I gave it a 10. And I will be going over my ratings again because the ones you're reading off are not accurate anymore for the most part. Or some of them. I would also, you know what? Just based on Casino Royale, I'm going to give it a 9. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Kat gave it a 3. I gave it a 6.
On You Only Live Twice, I gave it a 4. Kat gave it a 1. A 1. On Thunderball, we tied out at 7s. On Goldfinger, Kat gave it a 9. I gave it an 8. On From Russia with Love, I gave it a 5. Kat gave it a 6.5 or a 7. And for Dr. No, we both tied out at 9s.
All right, so I'm going to go through mine again.
Please. You want to start at Diamonds Are Forever?
No, I'm going to start in the chronology that we were doing. So Dr. No.
Son of a bitch.
I think I'm going to put that one down at an 8, actually, because I do think the second half drags a bit much in the third half hour of the film. You do all this great build up in the first half to the character, and it takes a while to get there. So From Russia with Love, I don't recall giving it a half. I guess I did. I just give that one a 6.
You were teetering between 6 7, and you were leaning towards a 6 or a 7. So I gave the benefit of a 6.5 or a 7.
Right,
but if you would, okay, 6.
Goldfinger can stay at 9. Thunderball stays at 7. You Only Live Twice can stay at 1.
Oh, you spiteful.
Majesties can stay at 3. Diamonds I had 2. Okay, that could stay at 2. Casino was a 10.
So you say?
Yes, a 10. Quantum I'm going to downgrade to a 5.
Ooh, heavens.
Skyfall I'm going to downgrade to like I'm tempted to like 6.5.
All right.
So Skyfall 6.5. Spectre is still at 4.
Okay. Yep.
No Time to Die. I'm still riding that 10 high.
It's up.
I've been still riding that 10 high for that one, but that could possibly fall to a 9.5 potentially.
I only have 1 10.
What did I give Live and Let Die?
Live and Let Die.
I think I gave that a 6. I can't remember.
Oh my god! You know what? I didn't get. You Live and Let Die.
I think
I didn't get last week's.
That's right.
That's the only one I didn't get.
That's the one I asked last week if we could do halves. That one I would give.
Yeah. Okay, so Live and Let Die. You're giving a 6.5.
Yeah.
All right.
And now we'll be doing The Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna give Live and Let Die a 4. 4.
Okay.
My God, Rosie Carver is so attractive. She absolutely brings up the score no matter what. And the theme song, like, I don't know what. Yeah, 4. So anyway, we're moving on, ladies and gentlemen. It is the moment you've all been waiting for. We are going to discuss Man with the Golden Gun. We still have Harry Saltzman kicking around in production.
Yeah, we could have called this Harry Saltzman the movie.
I wish we would.
I feel for this whole movie, it's much more a Harry Saltzman production than it is a Guy Hamilton directed picture.
I still like it better than Live and Let Die.
Yeah.
You want to get into it?
All right, so we have our gun barrel, and I noticed it's kind of interesting because some of when the whites are going across the screen, some of them are white, some of them look gray, which is kind of like, I kind of caught that. This is an odd one because for the second time in a row now, they decided to not have Bond in the pre-title sequence for the new era of actor, which is quite odd. And so we pick up with Rodney, the gangster, played by Mark Lawrence, a Chicago gangster who's only in this scene because Tom Mankiewicz thought it would be interesting to see a Chicago gangster in Thailand. Okay. Of course, he played the gangster in Diamonds Are Forever, and since his personality seems the same, he may be the same character because Bond didn't kill him in that film.
You know what? And I thought about this ever since you mentioned it in Diamonds Are Forever. I don't think they're the same character because their suits are different. Their entire, I don't know. There's something about this particular character that is different from the original, portrayed by the same actor. I think they're different people.
All right. Yeah, this island, by the way, is about 10 miles south of Phuket in the Phuket Tao Island chain.
Cat.
Yeah.
It's pronounced fuck it.
Okay. Okay, moving on. So Nick Nack arrives to greet Rodney, and Nick Nack is played by the wonderful Hervé Villechaize. He's kind of dressed to the nines, he's like a butler, and he tells this guy to quiet down, and he pulls him aside to take him around this side door into this really nice lounge area. But we see, meanwhile, Francisco Scaramanga and his mistress, Miss Anders, suntanning on the beach.
Hang on, Tukins. This is also the foxiest that things have gotten in the pre-title sequence. I was like, oh, hello. Maud Adams is here in a bikini, you say? Is that a third nipple? Heavens. Things are sexy.
All right, so he goes, so Rodney's walking around the lounge. Nick Nack kind of abandons him, and Rodney snoops around, and you see this room that's got like a whole bug collection, like beetles and butterflies and all that. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But then he, of course, being a moron, kind of steps by, rather than just staying put, he goes behind this door and finds himself locked in, and now he's in the funhouse, which is like this totally asymmetrical, shapeless, dark room with all these weird things, be it Chicago gangsters like Al Capone popping up out of the dark. And actually he mentions something about that, like a little, Rodney makes a quip to Capone and saying, hey man, I'm not the one who got you here. You see like an old Western cowboy with come out with like firing the guns out of the double doors, and who was actually styled off of Roger Moore's stunt double, actually. Which is kind of interesting. And Scaramanga, meanwhile, does not have his gun yet. He's moving around in the dark in a tracksuit, and he makes his way to this gun cabinet, but it's got like these doors are closed, all these like chicken wire on there, so he can't get to it. And Nick Nack's voice comes over the PA system, and he's like mocking Scaramanga because he's like making it harder for him deliberately, which I kind of love. The Scaramanga keeps moving through the funhouse, and you eventually get to
Monsieur.
Yeah, he gets to this atrium where there's like a bunch of mirrors and a wax statue of Bond. Rodney is hiding behind that statue, peering out from one of the mirrors, and Scaramanga does this trick where he runs down this stair, which he presses this right button so the stairs like flatten out like a ramp, so he can slide down, and he grabs the golden gun and kills Rodney.
Oh my god!
Shot to the forehead.
That's amazing.
It is, and he kills him, and then the lights come on and music shuts off, and Nick Nack comes in and greets him, and it makes a little quip, and then he spins around and shoots the four fingers off of the wax statue of Bond. And I kid you not, the first time I saw this movie when I was like 9 years old or something, I'm like, that's how Bond's gonna get him. He's gonna take the place of that statue, and he is going to shoot him. I knew it immediately, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Then we go into what the main titles, which are, and first of all, I should say what I like about this pre-title sequence is that it tells you an awful lot about how narcissistic and arrogant Scaramanga is. Because, I'm going to go into this funhouse unarmed, and Nick Nack is kind of playing against me, but dude, you've been in this funhouse so many times. You have such a supreme advantage over your foes. And the fact that Mark Lawrence as Rodney, I'm sorry, but he's not intimidating at all, and he seems very much out of his element in this whole sequence, that it's not like there's not much there's a little bit of tension kind of when you're wondering like what the hell's going on in this funhouse and why is it here, but I like that it does show just how cocky and full of himself Scaramanga is, which Bond will point out much later in the film. So I thought that was actually a nice character building moment.
Yes. And I think that it is excellent in terms of building up, especially considering the actual title sequence, The Man with the Golden Gun. This is a movie that I think establishes The Man with the Golden Gun better than Goldfinger established Goldfinger. You know the threat of this film immediately based on like the entire pre-title it's Scaramanga's show, and I love it. Then we get into the title sequence. Lulu, this song for 1974, pardon my French, this shit is metal. Sorry.
Yeah, it's probably the hokiest Bond song, the most on the nose Bond song with the innuendos. Many critics called it just a straight smut all the way through, but it was actually kind of clever.
Well, the entire movie is smut.
Yeah, and all that risque stuff that you usually get in the titles. I meant a lot of the Roger Moore era title sequences I'm not that impressed with. They seem kind of bland or kind of roll into each other. I'm not that. It's like, okay. But
as a teenage boy, or even as a pre-adolescent boy growing up, the Roger Moore pre-title or the title sequences, that is the most nipple silhouette you're gonna get.
Yeah, I think there might be later in the film as well. Anyway, we come out of the pre-title sequence, find Bond in London at MI6 headquarters. Coldheart is there, who's the ballistics expert at MI6. He's there with Q, and M is talking to Bond for an update. And Bond apparently has been on this mission to try and find this scientist who's working on this device called a Solex agitator, which it's like an invented MacGuffin that is able to harness solar energy better than solar panels, even.
I would remind you, sir, that the energy crisis is still in full swing, and I have to whatever.
Right. So the Bond's giving quips about that, but then M just kind of changes the subject and asks him what he knows about Scaramanga. And at first, Bond is kind of at a loss. He's like, "Oh yes, the man with the golden gun." And he tells this whole story. The guy was born in the circus, kind of ran away, became a underpaid assassin with the KGB for a while, and eventually struck out on his own. And charges $1 million a shot, and is a total bad faith actor on his own. Doesn't really play ball for any particular country. And M's like, okay, you know anything else about him? And Bond's like, not much. He tells him about the biological thing, that he has like a third nipple or whatever. But he doesn't really know anything about what the guy looks like or where he is. And M's like, well, that's going to pose a problem because he's going to have the edge on you. He's like, what are you talking about? And he pulls out this, a golden bullet.
Oh.
Maybe my camera won't focus on it, but I got 007 etched on the bullet casing. Or on the bullet, meaning, of course, it's useless as a bullet, but apparently that's Scaramanga's calling card when he's going to call someone out to kill them, which further shows how arrogant he is and how confident he is that, I'm going to give you every type of edge you can possibly have over me, but I'm still going to win. And so M rather unceremoniously takes Bond off the case of finding the scientist Gibson. So Bond is upset about this, and he's like, well, M's like, you better take care of this. You can be on sabbatical or whatever until this threat is passed. So Bond goes out of the office and goes to greet Moneypenny, and he asks her about Bill Fairbanks, 002. And she's like, oh, yes, killed in Beirut. Suspect was Scaramanga was the suspect. He's like, well, how come they weren't able to confirm it, he asked. She's like, well, they couldn't find the bullet. So Bond takes Moneypenny's little suit of advice and goes to Beirut to the strip club, or belly dancer, whatever it is. And Bond's sitting at this table having a drink, and you have the belly dancer there, and you see that the golden bullet, the smashed golden bullet, is she's using it as a jewel for on her stomach, kind of thing. And the whole time Bond's watching this performance, for some reason, her bodyguards or whatever are like really eyeing him in particular, as opposed to any other people in the room.
Well, he's the only honky. It's like chasing a cue ball.
Well, so is her bodyguard. He's a big bald.
Oh, that's true. Oh, yeah, no, I forgot. He's like a Cyrus Redblock looking dude.
Yes. And so Bond goes backstage, he knocks on the door, and he greets her, and he asks her about Bill Fairbanks, and she's like, oh, yes, I was so sad. I didn't really see him, though. My eyes were closed. And he's like, oh, was it fun for you? She explains how the bullet passed through and hit the concrete wall, and that she just took the bullet out and used it as her lucky charm since then. And Bond starts flirting with her and wants the bullet. She won't give it to him, and so then he starts kissing her. And
may I interrupt?
Yeah.
So Roger Moore as James Bond goes into this lady's dressing room. Now, I don't think that we're supposed to get the impression that this woman is attractive, except for her body. I believe the term that the kids are using is butterface. And so, well, no, like, I have a hard time differentiating Roger Moore and James Bond in this movie. In fact, I don't see James Bond at all. I just see Roger Moore. And so he's trying to seduce her out of obligation.
Well, like I said, he was seducing her because he wanted the bullet. She wouldn't give it to him, so then he decides to seduce her further, figuring he could just kiss it off of her stomach, which he does.
Until
burst in the room, and there's a fight, and if you look, you'll notice that they knock one of the wall mirrors, and you see like the cameraman and the camera and all of that, and they're like, by the time they figured it out, it was too late, and they're like, we're not going to spend the money to reshoot this, so whatever. And eventually, after Bond, knocks everybody out, even at one point using a can of hairspray to spray in this guy's eyes, she's eventually realizes she's lost. She's like, "Oh, I lost my charm," and Bond's like, "From where I'm standing," doing that really, Roger Moore isms, if you will. But I thought that kind of fit for his version of what Bond is.
Yeah,
you can kind of make that critique about him in a lot of his movies, that he's doing the whole Roger Moore shtick because, well, he's Roger Moore. So he leaves. He takes the golden bullet back to MI6, takes it to Q Branch. They're examining the ballistics, and they determine that this guy named Lazar made the bullet. And Bond's kind of impatient this whole time, waiting for them to tell him what he wants to know. And Q doesn't seem to have as much as usual patience for Bond in this instance. Now, I'm not sure why they brought in this character for the ballistics expert instead of just having Q do this and make it a typical, Q Branch scene, because Bond doesn't get any gadgets from Q in this film.
See, it's funny because right off the hop after the opening title sequence, Bond walks in, M asks, and also glorious Bernard Lee. I'm appreciative of that line. But yeah, no, he asks James Bond a question, and James Bond knows everything. I really think moving forward, the only person who knows more than James Bond is Q. I think this is the only person who M allows. And also, the respect that Q shows M was a really neat sort of touch in the Roger Moore era. Because when Q says something to M, it's always like, but sir, he's almost 3PO-esque. And it's just like, but sir, no, a Solex agitator.
Yeah, it's great. He just, and how M throughout the movies is constantly dismissive of Q's little corrections. It's like, oh, shut up, Q. But it cultivates that relationship. I enjoy it. What I thought was also interesting is that given that this is the first Roger Moore Bond film that Q is in, you don't really have that great one-on-one Bond Q scene in this movie because they have the ballistics expert there. Now, I can't recall if this ballistics expert was from the book or not. It just seems kind of odd that he's there. And so
later on, there is a moment where Q is smarter than James Bond.
Yeah, we'll get to that moment. So
okay.
So they identified that Sky Lazar made the bullet. So, yeah, Q's like, oh, this is the chap who made the bullet 007 because he thinks it's like a Portuguese. So Bond goes to Macau, goes into, this is a funny scene. So he steps into this shop that's where Lazar's supposed to be living, and he sees this family, this like mom and her kids or whatever, eating a bowl of rice, and he asks them for Lazar. He's supposed to live here, and they just kind of stare at him, and it's not clear if there's a language barrier issue or if they just don't care to respond to him. But Lazar eventually shows up behind the curtain, and he's like, oh, you come in. So he takes him downstairs, and he's like, oh, it'll be the significant pleasure of my life and the privilege of my life to make something for James Bond. And I was like, okay, so you're not that great of a secret agent because people know who you are. So
I get the impression that James Bond is famous at this point, and everyone is aware of it.
Yeah, so he shows him this one rifle in particular, because he's like, oh, would you like me to make a rifle for you? And he's like, this one was made for a guy who only has 3 fingers. And so Bond's like, where's the trigger? And he's like, oh, it's housed in the butt of the gun. You just squeeze it. And he's like, oh, go, try it. And so Bond shoots this target at the end of the line, but he misses it by an inch. And, Lazar laughs because he's kind of happy. He's like, yeah, see, it was made for a three-fingered man, meaning you're going to be an inch too low each time. And Bond's like, okay, whatever. And he inquires if he's ever made golden bullets. And he's like, Lazar's like, I did that for one client once. And Bond's like, oh, you tell me more? And he's like, sorry, I can't really betray the trust of my clients, not even for you, Mr. Bond. And so Bond takes this opportunity to take the rifle and start aiming it at him. And the guy's getting nervous, and he's like standing up on his legs to try and make room because Bond's pointing the gun between his legs. And he fires, and of course it misses. And Bond's like, oh, you're right, an inch too low. And then he cocks the gun, and Lazar just goes into the side room and gets the box of golden bullets. He's like, here it is. Yeah. I make them. I deliver them about once a month. It's like, look, I swear I don't know where I'm supposed to. Who it is that picks this stuff up? My instructions are to go to the casino and then I get paid and and leave. So we cut to a casino, one of Macau's many famous casinos, and this is again, if people are remembering when we did our Skyfall reviews, this is how I mentioned this movie was drawn heavily from for Skyfall. So Bond goes to the casino, and I'm not exactly sure. Maybe you can illuminate this. What this table is? So he's sitting So Lazar's sitting at this table. It looks like there's a game going on the table, but people from the second floor lower little baskets to all sorts of others, and you put things in there to pass it up. And I'm like, is this like some weird game where you bet against somebody up front? I don't know what it is, but Lazar puts the box of golden bullets inside, and Miss Anders is the one who receives them.
But I feel like I've seen it in other James Bond movies. There's always, like, I've seen this in other movies. I don't know the game.
Yeah, I don't.
Let us know in the chat.
Yeah, somebody in the chat, tell us about it. I'm not exactly sure what game this is. So, or if it's a game at all, maybe it's just a way to do your mail while you're playing on the cards on the table.
Maybe it's just a way to accommodate the people in the balcony.
Yes. So, Miss Anders, played by Maud Adams, who yes, another. This is a funny story about that actually. Both Maud Adams and Britt Ekland in this film were, Swedish models at the time. And, they both, the Britt Ekland in particular really wanted to be in the movie. And she went out of her way to contact Cubby Broccoli to ask to be in it. And when she heard that Maud Adams got cast, she was really upset because Britt thought that Maud was cast as Mary Goodnight, which is the role that she wanted. And then when she found out that wasn't the case, she was really happy. So they both got the role they wanted, which is kind of cool. So anyway,
incredibly charming and charismatic actresses, Maud Adams and Britt Ekland.
Oh yes,
Brick. I didn't mean to say brick. But I would also like to say at this point, Roger Moore in the film, wet sandwich.
Yeah, so he follows Miss Anders from Macau. She takes a boat over to Hong Kong, goes to a hotel, and Bond is at first he tries to get a cab to follow the car because she gets into like a green Rolls Royce. But then another car pulls up and blocks his path. So he gets out of the taxi and he asks this woman, "Can you please move this crap out of the way?" And he sees that it's Mary Goodnight, the MI6's liaison from the office sent to help him. And Bond is immediately agitated, as he always is with her. Like you could tell he thinks she's a total ditz. Even though admittedly she did just prevent him from following his lead. And he's like, "Look, I need to follow that car." She's like, "Oh, don't worry, I know where it's going." So they take off, and she's like, "Yes,
it's a blue Rolls Royce. Good night. There can't be that many of them."
Actually, I think it was green.
Well, okay, I stand corrected. Yes,
and she tells him that all those Rolls Royces belong to the Peninsula Hotel, which is true, by the way, in real life even. So they go to the hotel. Bond sneaks into Miss Anders' room. She's taking a shower. And then, Bond sneaks up on her with a gun, and she sees that he's there and asks him she has a gun on her too. And she asks him or Bond didn't pull out his gun at the time, I guess, because he thought he had her, she's vulnerable, she's in the shower or whatever. Again, Bond creeping up on the mistress in the shower again. Skyfall did that as well. Except this time Bond gives her the robe, and she comes out, and, you can see they're playing around with the nudity thing with the shower door, and even when she opens it a bit, she puts on the robe, and she marches.
Oh, no. So also, again, I think that this is the most obvious of the sexual innuendo James Bond films. And that was Maud Adams standing behind frosted glass. That was, you could see tan lines and everything.
Yeah, even when she opened the door briefly, when he handed her the
Quite.
robe. Yeah, so she marches him into the next room, and Bond very quickly just disarms her because she shows the golden bullets, and he knocks the gun out of her hand. And then what feels like his most Sean Connery Bond moment, his era, he gets very aggressive, which is very out of character for his Bond for the rest of the series. And he holds her down on the bed. He's bending her arm back and is about to break it. But he's being very calm and casual about it, which is almost his way of doing the Connery thing. Because when Connery would hit a girl or a woman or whatever, he'd be literally angry. And you could see it in his eyes and hear it in his voice. Whereas Roger's doing the whole, almost like he's being gentlemanly in his voice and his tone. Whereas he's nearly threatening to break this lady's arm. And she's like, doesn't want to tell him because, "Oh, you'll kill me." And she finally confesses as Scaramanga, but she doesn't tell Bond where he is. She's like, "I don't know where." And then he throws her down in the bed again and is about to strangle her or whatever. And she says, "Oh, he's got a date at the Bottoms Up Club tonight." And he's like, "Oh, see what you can do when you try." And I'm thinking, oh, that's, of its time, sort of. I mean, 1974, I don't recall seeing a bunch of other 70s movies which do this.
No, I understand that, and I understand where you're coming from. And it is a very Connery sort of aggressive. Yeah, no, it's indiscriminate abuse against anyone that is going to provide information is a very James Bond characteristic. And I think that it is out of place with Roger Moore. The person who sells this scene is absolutely Maude Adams.
Oh, 100%. But
she is the one who sells the fact that Bond is hurting her. I think that whoever won Best Actress of 1974 should give it to Maude Adams.
Yeah, I imagine how much worse that scene would have been if, in the spirit of how Skyfall is copying from this movie, if they had played up the fact, because in Skyfall it's that she was a sex slave who eventually got somehow taken in by Silva, whereas in this case, yes, she's Scaramanga's mistress, but we don't really know that yet. But imagine if we already knew she was a mistress, or if she had that type of background, and seeing Bond do this, it would be, ooh, can you imagine if Bond had done that to Severine in Skyfall? Right. It's like, it really, so watching this scene in this movie, especially now that once I saw those parallels between those two films, like once I see it, I can't unsee it. So watching Maude Adams now in this movie, it's almost like I can't help but equate her with Severine, and looking at Bond doing that, especially since she does mention later in the film that, you know, she, like, Bond even asked her at one point, well, why didn't you get away from him or whatever? She's like, well, I tried. You know, it's not that easy. And so, yeah, that scene is very, so, okay. So we get through the scene, and so Bond goes to the Bottoms Up Club, which is a real club at the time. They weren't able to shoot interiors, so they rebuilt that at Pinewood, but they filmed the exteriors there. That's the same club, by the way, from Chungking Express, the Wong Kar-wai film from 1994. So Bond goes to the Bottoms Up Club, and it's kind of a racy scene. He's sitting around watching everything, trying to figure it. He's looking for Scaramanga because Miss Anders told him that, oh, Scaramanga is usually in a white suit with a black tie, tall, dark, and handsome type thing. And, you know, Bond doesn't see him there, but he does notice Gibson, who is the missing Solex scientist. And it's like, oh, what a coincidence, which admittedly is a bit of a big coincidence for this story. So Gibson steps outside, Bond kind of follows him, and then all of a sudden we see a close-up in what feels like a very film noir throwback, where you see the shadows lying on Scaramanga and the apartment across the street. The light is glittering off the golden gun as he's just preparing to take aim with his. You see the guy like super up close as he's taking aim, and then bam!
Oh yeah,
he kills Gibson.
It kind of reminded me from Russia with Love.
Yeah, it does. It is just like that scene. And so Gibson drops dead. Bond and everybody else drop to the ground around him. And then, sure enough, the police show up real quick. Lieutenant Hip shows up as well, and he immediately arrests Bond. And you see Knick Knack wander up, and he takes a look at the body, and Hip's like, hey, you, get away from there. And it's like, oh, okay. But we didn't see it on screen, but we realized in hindsight that Knick Knack did steal the Solex agitator from Gibson out of his pocket.
I win, monsieur.
Yeah, exactly. And so they make away, and so for this next little ride, it's funny because he says that he's going to take Bond to the police station in Kowloon, but they're already in Kowloon, on the Kowloon side of town, so they shouldn't have to take the boat, whatever. So
there are so many misdirections in this particular. Okay.
And Bond's really nervous, and Hip's kind of just trying to be deadly serious about it. But instead of going to any police station, they go to the wreck of the RMS Queen Elizabeth, which was a ship that had been undergoing renovations in that harbor in 1972. Caught fire. They don't know how the fire started, and so it partly sank. And it would eventually be sort of later. But anyway, Hip takes Bond aboard the ship, and Bond.
Are you talking about the Queen Elizabeth II that was sunk under mysterious circumstances in 1972?
Yes. So anyway, the hatch opens, and he's like, oh, welcome, Commander Bond. It's like, what's this? So he marches down below, and we see that even though the ship is partly sunk on its side, somebody's gone in there and built like ramps and stairwells to actually match it. So this is, and we find out that this is actually like an MI6 base. And the reason that the base is here is because he's like, oh, we got the Chinese on one side, got the Indians on the other, and so this is the safest place where you can be without getting bugged.
Well, and they like recovered a Chinese fighter.
Yeah, fighter jet, and this has to be hands down the weirdest MI6 field office in the whole series. It just, who thought it was a good idea to go into the wreck of a ship, which is only still here because it's an unstable thing, and let's build. It's very hokey. So
well, no, but this is also the beginning of things that have happened throughout, and we'll get there when we get there. But this is something that is recurring during the Moore era. Not only do the villains have lairs, but also MI6, anywhere they want. They set up a franchise in the most peculiar of places.
yeah, so Bond is brought into the main room and he sees that Q, Colthurst, and or not Colthurst, another liaison of some kind, and M. And then Lieutenant Hip shows up. He's like, "Sorry, Commander Bond, I couldn't trust the Hong Kong police, so I had to, keep quiet and keep you in the dark." But if you notice, if you look really closely, you'll notice that Hip kind of smiles and snickers to himself at the fact that Bond has seen that this isn't being arrested or whatever. So he kind of had a fun dig at him, which I thought was kind of funny. So M wants to know what's going on, and Bond like, "What's he doing here?" And Bond's like, "Well, Scaramanga must not have a contract out on me because he had me dead to rights tonight, and instead he killed Gibson." And so M asked Lieutenant Hip, "What was Gibson doing here?" He's like, "Well, we were having a meeting. We were having a kind of like trying to get the Solex agitator from him, having trying to work out a deal." But he was kind of not really trusting me, and he wanted to set up a follow-up meeting in Bangkok. And M's like, "Okay, well, where's the Solex agitator?" He's like, "Well, Gibson put it in his pocket before the meeting ended, but then it was gone when I checked the body." And M's like, M's just like totally upset about this. And Bond's like, "Well, it feels that they don't really have any more leads. And the suggestion is that by Lieutenant Hip, actually, that the person who would be able to afford $1 million contract if it was indeed Scaramanga that killed Gibson would be High Fat, multi-millionaire trying to get energy field in China." And so he could have seen him as a rival who wants the agitator. And so Bond says, "Yeah, I could go and investigate and find out." And he picks up this piece of paper and he draws something on it and he hands it to Q and he's like, "Hey Q, can you make this for me?" And we don't see the picture on the paper, but Q's like, "Really, 007?" And Bond's like, "Yeah, I admit it's a little kinky, and so M's like, "Okay, we'll finally do this." And Lieutenant Hip says, "Oh yeah, I got relatives over there in Bangkok. I know High Fat. I could take you over there." So we cut to Bangkok, and Lieutenant Hip thinks it's a good idea to try and stake the place out not by parking a car on a hill on another side or getting binoculars or trying to get a radio. No. He thinks he's going to do the old-fashioned thing of have Bond stand on his shoulders outside the wall of this garden and hope that they can see something useful.
Like, what a bumbling duo these people are.
Exactly. This, by the way, this beautiful garden, because Bond decides that I'm not just going to look over the wall, I'm going to jump over the wall. And this garden, by the way, is the Hong Kong Dragon Garden. It's only been in a couple films. Private garden, really beautiful place. You see all these beautiful dragon statues, all these wonderful plants and pools. And Bond comes upon this woman who's skinny dipping in the pool, and he asks her,
"Chew me?"
Yeah, she's like, "What's your name?" "Chew you." And he's like, "Oh," she's like, "Chew me." And he's like, "Oh, really?" And she's like, "Oh, come swim with me." He's like, "Oh, I don't have any swimming trunks." She's like, "Neither do I." And Bond starts slowly unbuttoning his shirt, and then High Fat walks up, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing here? This is private. Get out of here." And then Bond finishes unbuttoning his shirt, and High Fat sees the third nipple, and he's like, "Oh." And it's like, "Ooh, Scaramanga." And so Bond, in a surprising motion, tells High Fat that you should be worried about this guy, James Bond, British Secret Service, Agent 007, licensed to kill. And he's basically trying to push him into hiring him to kill Bond, which I don't know if it's the best idea to tell High Fat that, you're basically there, not telling him that he is there because he thinks that High Fat believes him to be Scaramanga, but to tell him that Bond is hunting him, because it's like High Fat's he could probably get the information he needs to find out who Bond is. After all, just one city over when he was in Macau, Lazar recognized Bond immediately, even though they'd never met. So is it the best idea to tell High Fat that, "Oh, by the way, Bond is hunting you. You should beware."
Yeah.
Especially when you think that High Fat is the person who potentially had Gibson assassinated for the Solex agitator. So not the smart.
Right. They do make a point of saying that High Fat and Scaramanga have never met, but they also do make a point that James Bond is very well known and everyone knows who he is.
Right. So High Fat, he considers taking him up on his offer to hire him to kill Bond. And he's like, "Well, we'll talk about it at dinner tonight." And Bond's like, "Okay." And so and High Fat turns to his assistant, Ling. He's like, "Mr. Ling, show Mr. Bond out of here, or show Scaramanga out of here." And so Bond leaves, he goes to get picked up. Lieutenant Hip now picks him up in his car, and Bond and Hip can't believe it. He's like, "Wait, you didn't actually see him?" And he's like, "Oh, better. He invited me to dinner." And then Bond just pulls the fake nipple off and throws it away, which is not the smartest idea.
Well, okay, first things first. He walks out the front door, crosses the street, walks half a block, and there's Hip.
Not even half a block. It's like barely 10, 20 feet down from the main door out diagonally down.
This is the most Barney Fife operation I have ever seen.
It's funny you should say that because that comes up later, actually. So Bond gets in the... And again, it's stupid that he throws the fake nipple away because you never know what's going to happen to the estate, and you don't know that he hasn't figured it out yet. So he throws it away, gets in the car, they take off, and then we see that the real Scaramanga has already met High Fat. High Fat knew that Bond was not the real Scaramanga. And presumably Scaramanga told him that the real Bond was coming here, and that's why High Fat has been putting up with it, because really their liaison is effectively over at this point, for the most part. Because he already killed he already killed Gibson for High Fat and provided him the Solex agitator. So it's like, okay. So anyway, Bond decides that he's going to sneak in that night to go to dinner. And before he does that, though, he goes back to the hotel. He takes Mary Goodnight out to dinner. And she thinks they're going to have a really nice evening, and they go back into the hotel room. But he then surprises her by saying, "Sorry, I have to go tonight. Dinner with somebody else," kind of thing. And she's kind of upset, and she's like, "Oh, well, you'll be back, James." He's like, "Oh, don't worry, I'll be back. Nothing's going on." But then Lieutenant Hip shows up to pick him up, and he's got his two teen daughters in the back seat. And this is kind of weird because Mary Goodnight takes issue with this. She's like, "Oh, busy indeed." And like, what did you think that
James is running off with Sailor Moon and Sailor Venus? This is the worst.
Yeah, did she think he was gonna go sleep with them? And that's because that's how they're kind of.
It seems that way.
Yeah,
well, it's weird. The whole movie presupposes a relationship between Goodnight and Bond, and it seems,
her is almost like a pretext to Moneypenny from Skyfall, in the sense that she's a field agent he is familiar with.
But it seems like
her job is more so being a liaison desk jockey type thing. But they kind of have a flirtatious Moneypenny in the sense that it's like a flirtatious relationship. Like maybe they haven't slept together yet.
No, I get the impression that James Bond rocked Goodnight's world is my impression. And James Bond now seems to think of her as baggage and treats her as such. I think he's really dismissive and rude to her until he gets to use her. I find this the most distasteful relationship that James Bond has ever had, because in this film, I like Mary Goodnight better than I like James Bond.
Yeah, that's true. So they drive off, or he drives off with High Fat and his nieces, and not High Fat, but with Lieutenant Hip and his nieces. And Lieutenant Hip mentioned, he's like, "Yeah, I got to drop him off at his dance or whatever." And they drop Bond off at High Fat's estate. He walks in to go there, and he looks at all these statues of like sumo wrestlers and demons and dragons. And Bond's like, "Oh, Grizzly Land." And then all of a sudden, one of the little people statues, he realizes it's not a statue, it's Knick Knack, wearing like the mask with paint on his face. And then these two actual sumo wrestlers step out, and you have this awkward fight where they kind of knock Bond out, and they lay him down on a bench, and Knick Knack's about to kill him with the.
You missed the whole twisting of the sumo.
Yeah, he picks him up and holds him over. One of the sumo wrestlers picks Bond up and holds him over his shoulder. And Bond grabs his
his lower dress, and because of the way that it is tied, he turns the knot. At which point, the little sumo wrestlers are constricted. And I don't find this any more distasteful than the death of Mr. Wint or Mr. Kidd, whichever.
Yeah.
And I just find it at the time, Hans Mole Man getting kicked in the nuts is funny. It just is. It doesn't matter. And that's what they do to the sumo wrestler. Anyway, the sumo wrestler goes down, but Knick Knack pulls out a trident and hits him on the back of the head with it. And then they lay him up on some sort of slab of concrete, and they're about to stab him, which Knick Knack could have done instead of hitting him. And High Fat says, "Not here. This is my home. Take him to the farm."
Well, take him to the school.
School, not the farm. Pardon me.
But that's another weird thing. It's like, okay, you have him dead now. You can finish him off, but no, let's not do this here. Let's go. It's like, really? It's like, do you care? I mean, I guess.
No, I get it though. I get it. Don't kill him on my property. Don't do it there. Take him away. Why
not? It's not like this is the surveillance state. I mean, he could get away
do you
with
have
it.
Any idea how hard it is to get blood out of my slab of whatever that is that you got him on?
You can pressure wash it,
I suppose.
So anyway, they knock Bond unconscious, and Knick-Knack's kind of upset about this. He just kind of throws the trident aside in disgust. And Bond wakes up in this dojo.
Oh, also, I just want to point out before we move on, and I apologize. I am as the band The Odds say, I am a heterosexual man, but Hervé Villechaize, quite cut for a little person.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't. He's proportional and attractive and charming. If I were in the 70s and a lady.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because he actually would have these little games where he would be like writing love letters to the various female crew members on the shoot, and they would like slip love letters back under his door. And he, according to Christopher Lee, he would be out partying so much after filming because he had such an appetite for the ladies, as was said. When they went to film in near Phuket for the
It's pronounced fuck it.
They would film they went to a brothel to stay there because there was no hotel, and the producers apparently paid for all of the employees, so to speak, of all the ladies to be off somewhere else on vacation while they were at this brothel. And so not all of the clientele were able to leave. And so, Hervé Villechaize had his fun there. And it was kind of a funny thing. Like, even at a back and forth with Maud Adams, she said that this little like sexual innuendo is being traded, which I thought was kind of funny. So
kudos to Hervé. Hervé? Sure. Yes. No, big ups. I don't want to be remiss. He is a gentleman, and may God have mercy on his soul. I'm sure he's in hell.
So Bond wakes up in a dojo, and these two ladies are like washing him with washcloths, and he's like, heaven, this must be heaven. But then the door is open, and he sees that there's a whole group of students for this karate school, one of which is like wearing all black, the rest are wearing like blue and red. And you see the sensei at the dojo, and he shouts a command, and these two guys, one in blue and one in red, show up, and they bow to the sensei, they bow to each other, and they both have like these dual blades, and they fight to the death. And Bond is kind of maintaining his composure. He's like, okay, that's interesting. So
Roger Moore is being bored and watching the floor show. It is so unengaging until he finally. Anyway, move on, please.
Well, no, you can tell that he's kind of worried a little bit because he knows that he's going to be called up to do this. And sure enough, he's called to face the winner. And so when he bows to first face his opponent, Bond just immediately kicks the guy in the jaw and knocking him unconscious. And then he turns and, bows to the sensei, such a Roger Mooreism type thing. And so these other guys take the unconscious fighter away. And then all of a sudden, all the students start shouting, Chula, Chula, Chula.
I love Chula. He is my favorite.
He is fantastic. So he's a student in all black sitting next to the sensei. He's kind of badass. He's been in a few other Thai films as well, and some American films as well. He's been around. So and of course this whole sequence being a total riff on the 70s kung fu genre, much like Live and Let Die was a blaxploitation film. So.
I don't know if a sequence applies here. No, Live and Let Die was in its DNA entirely a blaxploitation film. This has moments of kung fu. I wouldn't say that it is directly entirely.
I didn't say it was directly entirely.
Then my mistake. I apologize for interrupting. Please continue.
I said this whole sequence and feeling saying subplot is taken from old kung fu movies, as is most of the plot of a lot of those old kung fu cop, detective stories. So anyway, Bond and Chula have to bow to each other. But this time Chula does this thing where he's like looking up at Bond while he's bowing to make sure that he doesn't get kicked. And then the fight starts. And rather unbelievably, Bond does a pretty decent, good job against Chula, even putting him in a chokehold at one point and throwing him to the ground. And I'm like, no.
And also, the physicality of those fight scenes, like I think Roger Moore did well in terms of the physicality of it, and I liked the transition between sort of like judo and European boxing with the Thailand boxing, essentially.
Yeah, it's like Muay Thai boxing. So I just thought that Chula most certainly would have won because he's clearly the best student here and the sensei's favorite. And
Well, and also Roger Moore is already starting to look old.
right, yeah, he's 46 in this one, I think. So anyway, Bond knocks Chula to the ground at one point during this fight, and then he just runs and jumps through the wooden window. He falls on the ground, and then Lieutenant Hip and the girls show up, and he's like, "How did you know I was here?" And they're like, "Oh, High Fat owns this place." And it's like, okay, he owns it, but that doesn't explain how you knew that this is where he would send you, because who would logically think that, oh, I got to get rid of this guy. Oh, never mind, I'm a millionaire and probably have, paid up with a bunch of gangsters. Now let's send him to a karate dojo. Like, okay. So, yeah, it's ridiculous. So, Bond gets up off the ground, and all of a sudden all the dojo students surround them. Lieutenant Hip starts fighting some on one side, and then Bond steps in front of Hip's nieces. He's like, "Stand back, girls." But then they jump in front of him, like, "No, we're going to do this." And they take on the whole dojo by themselves, while Bond just kind of watches in awe.
All right. So I got to say, I was watching this, and this is the movie I was like, I always thought this movie was racist and sexist, but is this movie woke? Like, no, we got two young girls who are the superheroes of the first act of this film. When James Bond needs backup, who does he call? Sailor Moon and Sailor Venus. That's who. I thought it was amazing, but it goes downhill. Like, everything gets worse. So,
and after they've pretty much finished off one of the last goons, they hold him up so Bond can like punch him, and he kind of does this mock thing, and he falls passed out. And then they run to get in the car. And this scene is very odd because Lieutenant Hip gets in the driver's seat, the nieces get in the back seat. And even though Bond's not in the car yet, the nieces have already closed the door. He starts taking off, and they don't translate they're speaking in Thai to him, and so you don't hear exactly what, or Cantonese or whatever, and you don't hear what they're saying. But how long did it take them to say that? Bond's not in the car, but he just keeps going. It just keeps going and leaves Bond behind. So it was
okay. So I yelled at the screen. I was like, "So why didn't you stop?" And then James Bond got into a boat. And I was like, because you need a boat chase.
Well, it shows that the whole thing was a very gratuitous moment just for the sake of having the nieces fight. Because, like you said, the whole Sailor Moon, Sailor Venus thing, because they didn't really help Bond. They just kind of, if Bond had to just keep running, he would have ran to the boat anyway. So by having having Lieutenant Hip and his nieces show up is just there for an excuse to have a weird fight and that little joke. And so, okay. So Bond runs into this little canoe boat. He gets in, and then Chula and the others show up, but this one boat has a little motor on it. So Bond turns on the motor, and he pops it out of the water and starts singing around his fellas. And then we get into the sequence with a lot of racial, like old racist slurs throughout this whole next boat chase.
So, and who delivers these racial slurs?
Bond takes off on the boat, and fair enough, as both boats speed by a tourist boat and splash water all over the patrons, we see none other than Sheriff
Clifton James, ladies and gentlemen, is Sheriff J.W. Pepper.
And he just totally splashes like, "You try that in my bayou, boy, I'd haul your ass." And then
you pointy heads have as much knowledge of traffic control as a ghoulie bird.
Yeah, okay, I could buy that maybe the sheriff's wife would have fantasized about a trip to Thailand, reading about him in magazines or whatever. I cannot buy that he would actually go there.
I would also like to point out that J.W. Pepper does identify himself as a Democrat.
No, he identifies himself as a Republican. Remember?
He said...
No. This is what he says.
He wants to buy the elephant. I thought he's like, we're not going to buy no elephant. We're Democrats.
No. He says she wants to buy the wooden elephant statues from these people. And he's like, and Sheriff's like, "Don't buy this. They're Democrats."
Oh, they're Democrats. Well,
yeah, you could tell he's definitely not Democrat. He's he's the sheriff from the Louisiana parish. So,
well, I don't know how the Louisiana parishes vote these days, or in 1974. I don't know.
Yeah, so the boat chase goes on, and admittedly, this is not anywhere near as good as the boat chase in the last movie, but I don't mind because, hey, if you can have a car chase in every movie, why not have a boat chase in 2 movies? I don't mind it. But the weird thing is how it ends. So Chula and the others kind of lose Bond, and they're just kind of sitting at this like crossways, and they're like looking around, where is he? And then out of nowhere, you don't even hear the sound until the last second. The Bond's boat shows up and cuts their boat in half, and they'll sink into the water. And then JW has a laugh about it. And as he's laughing, making fun of them, this elephant starts picking his pocket. And he looks over at this baby elephant. He's like, "You are ugly." And then it knocks him into the water, which apparently was not planned. That was something that just kind of happened. He falls into like 10 feet of mud and guck. And that was kind of funny. But so Bond is,
Oh, that's why Harry Saltzman is so apparent in this film. There was one elephant, and he bought 100. 200 of the elephant shoes?
200 pairs of elephant shoes. It was funny because Tom Mankiewicz told the story that he and Harry were going over the script, and while they were in Thailand making script edits, and that he saw that they had the elephants there. It was really great, and he thought, somebody mentioned to him talking about the elephants with the elephant shoes, and so Harry's like, "That's great. Let's have." And he turns to the production.
If you're having technical issues on your end, I can't hear Kat, so I was going to say that Harry Saltzman said, "Here's all the money. Bring me elephant shoes." That's pretty much what. Okay, sorry, my mistake.
Yeah, so he's like, "Yeah, bring me all the elephant shoes." And Tom's like, "There isn't such a scene in the script," but Harry Saltzman, he's like, "Oh, we'll just do it anyway." And sure enough, at one point, these elephant shoes eventually arrived, and crates of them. And Cubby's like, "What the hell's all this?" And he's like, "Well, it's because even though Cubby and Harry were producing partners, they apparently would trade off as who would be more or less the main producer on each movie." And so Cubby's like, "What the hell is all this?" And they're like, "Oh, the elephant shoes." And Cubby's like, "Oh God!" And needless to say, that didn't make it into the film. So Bond.
Well, they didn't need dozens. There was only one elephant.
Yeah. So Bond goes after this chase, goes back to the hotel. He meets with Mary Goodnight, and it seems like they're gonna have a nice night. He's gonna sleep with her or whatever. But then there's a knock on the door, and he hides her under the covers first. And in walks Miss Anders, and in a ridiculous fashion, she sits on the bed, and it's like, how does she not clearly see that the covers are pulled over? And these are not like big. This is not like a big bedspread cover, mind you.
It's not even a comforter. It's literally a sheet. And he says himself, "That's why I use the old 3-pillow trick." And he taps on Goodnight. That doesn't sound like pillows. That sounds like you're slapping a Britt Eklund's bum.
Yeah, it's exactly what he was doing. And so I was like, oh God. So she starts kissing Bond, and really both trying to seduce him. And he's like, "Well, do you have anything called the Solex agitator?" And she's like, "I might." She kind of insinuates that she might have it for him. And so she goes into the bathroom to get like changed, and Bond just pulls Mary Goodnight out from under the covers and very unceremoniously shoves her in the closet like a jacket. And she tries to tell him, "Wait," and then he just slams the door shut again, and she's stuck in there. And so Miss Anders comes back, and they start having sex again, and she agrees basically to bring him the Solex agitator, and they set a meeting time.
Hang on a second. You made that sound so boring. So Miss Anders shows up, Andrea Anders shows up again, and they have sex or whatever. Maud Adams is smoking hot in this movie, yo. Every scene that she's in, I wish she were Goodnight. And luckily, I get a whole other movie in the future called Octopussy, where it's all Maud Adams. It's great.
Okay. So they did that. She eventually leaves, and we cut to later, and it's funny because the way they edited this next part is they show Miss Anders showing up back at Scaramanga's boat first. I did forget to mention that at some point earlier in the movie, we did see Miss Anders in bed on the boat, and Scaramanga coming there, and how uncomfortable she was being his mistress. And so,
well, he was kind of being inappropriate with his golden gun. He had just, like, Andrea does say that she only has sex with Scaramanga before he kills or during his murderous rampages as being the murderer. And after the fact, that's when he shows back up, and it seemed like he was kind of showing off his dexterity with his gun and making her feel the warmth of his gun all over, to coin a phrase, all over her face, neck, and chest. And it was really awkward, and it was obviously an assault and a violation, but I guess.
Yeah.
Money.
So the thing I was going to say that was odd about the edit is she goes back to the boat, and we see, oh, by the way, there's a dog on this boat. Surprisingly, you don't really see it again, but there's a dog there.
Really?
Yeah, there's a dog on the boat. It was either the first scene where he shows up on the boat, or it was this scene. I can't remember. There is a dog, a small dog there. But anyway, Scaramanga's lying in bed awake, and he wants to know why she was late. She's like, oh, the film bit late or something. Like she went to the movies, and of course, he doesn't really believe her. and she goes to get into bed with him. But then we cut back to the hotel room. And I'm like, wait a minute. So Bond opens the closet door, and Mary Goodnight's in there. It's like, what time is it? He's like, it's 2 a.m. He's like, I've been in here for 2 hours. And Bond tries to apologize. She's like, oh, that's it. I'm resigning in the morning. And she goes to storm out. And Bond, being kind of a real jerk, is like, oh, well, trying to be this fake apology type thing. I shouldn't really be upset about it. And, oh, our time will come, or soon, our time will soon come type of thing. And it's like, okay, she's very upset with him and is going to leave. But I'm thinking, wait a minute. So you waited until not just Miss Anders leaving the hotel. You waited till she went all the way, had the time to get all the way back to Scaramanga's boat before, because he doesn't open the door to the closet until after she's gotten back to Scaramanga's ship, which I thought was a long time. I guess that's just how the edit worked.
Well, put yourself in Mary Goodnight's pajamas. Like, she's just been shoved into a closet, and James Bond has decided to woo Miss Anders. And so Goodnight fell asleep, like didn't even pay attention to the wooing, didn't listen. Is James Bond a silent lover?
It's kind of like, it feels like an old sitcom type plot where you have.
It does. You're absolutely right. Oh my God, it is so. That is Jack Tripper putting Janet in a closet. Totally. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, well, I gotta hide you in here while I have the sex with the person in here, and it's like, okay, it feels very odd to have that in a Bond film, but okay.
It does, but there are more weird things that happen later.
Yes, because the next day, Bond and Lieutenant Hip and Mary Goodnight go to pull off this operation where they go to the Lupine Muay Thai Boxing Center. Bond goes to find Miss Anders, and he finds her. He sits down next to her, and he's talking, but then he notices she's not responding, and he thinks this is kind of odd. And he takes a closer look, and he sees that she's dead. And the bullet right through the heart. And so Bond kind of carefully goes through her luggage or through her purse. He's like, "Oh dear, I thought you just had it in here," trying to play it off as cool type of thing. And then Scaramanga sits down next to him. He's like, "It won't be in there, Mr. Bond. I already looked." He's like, and Bond doesn't seem to know who this guy is at first. He's like, "Oh yes, Scaramanga, Francisco Scaramanga." And Bond is like, "Oh, he's like a very interesting type of meeting." And all of a sudden he feels something in his bag. And Scaramanga's like, "Yeah, you don't try anything. You just look behind you." And he looks, he didn't see nothing, and Scaramanga's like, lower. And he looks lower. And you have Knick Knack pointing this little small pop gun at him.
Like a little Derringer. It's a
Derringer while he's eating a bag of peanuts. And Bond's like, midget with a gun and a bag of peanuts. How original.
Okay, so this is your trigger warning and of its time warning. Yeah. They throw around the word midget a lot.
They do. So he says that, and he says, "Oh, midget peanuts, how original." And he's kind of eating with it, and Bond looks down and he notices the Solex agitator on the ground amongst all of the other peanut shells and trash. And so he carefully puts his foot kind of over it, and he's listening to Scaramanga talk about how he's really impressed by Mr. Bond, and he realizes that, yeah, Scaramanga did not put the contract out on him, and which is something else that Bond... Sorry, I forgot to mention that. While Miss Anders was seducing Bond in the bedroom the night before, she did confess that she was the one who sent him the golden bullet in the hope that he would kill Scaramanga to free her. And Bond actually was surprised by that and apologized for being slow on the uptake.
James Bond's an idiot in this movie. He doesn't get what's going on. He's being led by the nose the entire time.
Yes. So Scaramanga makes that further clear that he didn't hire him for it. Like, oh, maybe our paths will cross again, Mr. Bond, but we can't really, do some of my affairs type of thing. And Bond raises up his hand like this, like he wants a bag of peanuts, and this guy comes by, one of the vendors comes by, and Bond sets the Solex agitator on the tray and grabs a bag of peanuts and this little...
Well, it ends up being Hip.
Yes, it's revealed that it's actually Lieutenant Hip. He goes outside and meets Mary Goodnight. He gives her the Solex agitator, and she has apparently figured out which car is Scaramanga's. So she goes, meanwhile, to place a homing beacon in the car, and just as she's placing it, Scaramanga pops up behind her and knocks her into the boot of the car, locks the trunk. She's stuck in there. Bond ends up running back outside to meet Lieutenant Hip, and they're going to get back in the car. They're like, "Where's Mary Goodnight?" And Bond, in another of its time reference, is like, Bond's like, "Oh, women." And so he gets out his walkie-talkie and is like, "Goodnight, where are you?" And she describes the car and how she just got shoved into the boot. And he's like, "Oh, we see you. We're coming for you." And they jump in the car, but he's like, "Wait, Hip, you got the keys?" And he's like, "No." She gets on the radio again. He's like, "Oh, Goodnight, where are the keys?" And she's like, "Oh, they're in my purse." And she says it as if that's a good thing. And Bond's like, "Oh, don't worry, we see you, we're coming." So Lieutenant Hip runs across the street trying to get a taxi, and nobody's stopping for him. So Bond decides to go across the street to a car dealership because, of course, cars that are on display in car dealerships have full tanks of gas and fully functioning car batteries, fully charged, ready to go.
Yeah, but the more unbelievable aspect of this particular scene is, I visited Thailand with my wife. Let's go to a car dealership.
It's not too out of the way. I mean, if I was at somewhere and I saw a really neat car I wanted to look at, I would still look at it, even if I'm not going to feasibly buy it while I'm there.
An AMC Pacer? Really?
Well, maybe not the AMC, the AMC Hornet, maybe not. But anyway. Pardon
me.
So he gets into the car and we see Sheriff Pepper's there, and he asks, "Can we go on a test drive here?" And Bond's like, "Oh, certainly, sir." So he revs the engine, he takes off, they crash through the glass, they take off into the streets, and they're chasing an AMC Matador coupe. And Sheriff Pepper's freaking out, and he notices that it's Bond. He's like, "I know you're that secret agent." And Bond's like, "Oh no."
Oh my God, your J.W. Pepper sounds like an angry Forrest Gump.
Yes. So, and Sheriff Pepper immediately gets into it. He's not even still upset anymore about the whole boat chase thing from the year before. And he's like, "Okay, who are you chasing now, boy?" And Bond's like, "You were going after that one." So they're taking off. And of course, Pepper starts complaining about the traffic and all of that, and then rolls the window and leans out and starts screaming at everybody in traffic. And it's like, oh, geez.
Adorable.
Yeah, more of the racial slurs and stuff. I mean, I admit I thought it was funny when they first revealed him on the boat, and he mentioned that, "Try that in my bayou, I'll haul you." I thought that was kind of funny, but this is just a bit okay. So I think as a little kid, I didn't mind it, and I thought it was kind of funny. And in a way, it still fits because this movie is so ridiculous on so many levels that, why the hell not throw him in there, And so,
and you know what? It doesn't last as long as I remembered. I always thought it was more of a slog. I find him a slog in Live and Let Die. This is sort of like what a weird effervescence this is. It's like something that's like, what is that smell? Never mind. It's just JW.
Yeah, the boat chase in Live and Let Die got extended because they're trying to give Sheriff Pepper his own mini story.
Movie, yeah.
Whereas here, he's just kind of there. And I admit, I don't mind Sheriff Pepper in either instance. It's just because, again, these two movies are so weird in and of themselves that that I don't really, it's like, whatever. I mean, if they didn't have things like the stuff with the karate school, the third nipple, all that weird stuff, the Queen Elizabeth ship for the MI6 headquarters, like, this movie's trying to do all sorts of crazy things, and I can't really go against it too much further for Pepper showing up. So anyway, they take off, and the car chase takes them out into the countryside. But then they realize Scaramanga somehow got the wool over their eyes, and he's on the other side of the river. And Sheriff Pepper's kind of distraught. He's like, "Oh, that's okay, boy. The nearest bridge is 2 miles back." So Bond spins the car around. He races back towards the bridge, but then he stops again, hits the brakes, pulls the car back off this dirt road because he spotted this busted bridge. And the sheriff's like, "What are you doing?" And he looks, and the sheriff looks ahead, and he sees this half bridge kind of twisted like this, and the other half twisted like this on the other side of the river. And the sheriff's like, "You're not gonna." And Bond's like, "I sure am, boy." And this is a great idea because apparently Michael G. Wilson and Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman had seen this stunt done at the Houston Astrodome during like a derby show, and it was called like the Astro Flip or something like that. And they had a guy come out to do this for them on location in Thailand. His name was Lauren Willard. And so they did this neat stunt. They had scuba divers under the river to be ready in case it went wrong. And everybody was there on set that day just about, because even if they weren't in the scene, people just wanted to be there to see, oh my God, what's this going to look like? And they kind of shot it in slow motion a bit because they knew it would happen so fast that you would not otherwise really get to appreciate the stunt. So the car does the jump. And by itself, it is impressive. And I admit, I wish I could have seen it in like real time, like regular speed, to see just how fast it is, because I always thought it looked a tad bit weird because it is in slow motion.
Well, and it is a practical effect. Now, before you get to, please.
Yeah.
I have to ask you 100%, okay?
Yeah.
Is this not the perfect moment in a James Bond movie to absolutely crank the volume to 11 and play Monty Norman's James Bond theme?
Yes.
And so what do they do instead of that?
John Barry, the great John Barry, took his initiative. The director did not tell him to do this. The producers did not tell him to do this. He did this on his own.
Fucking idiot.
Yeah, he added a slide whistle sound effect that doesn't even match, because as ridiculous as it is, the slide whistle should be halfway through when the car is halfway over the bridge. It doesn't even do that until it's already landed. But it's such a bad. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, this is a great stunt. You did it for real. It was so perfect that Cubby Broccoli turned to the stunt driver.
No.
That Cubby Broccoli turned to the stunt driver. He gave him $30,000 cash in hand as a bonus for having done this on location.
Oh my God.
That looks so good. Could we do it again? And he's like, absolutely not. It's like, I've never done that stunt before. It was too surreally perfect. We are not doing it again. And so, oh God, that John Barry put that on there. It's just, God, the one black mark on his career, and it's a big one. But it's funny, while I'm on this topic of John Barry, he really hated the music to this
Monty Norman and John Barry.
Monty Norman came up with the original theme, but John Barry's the one who actually did the orchestra did it, and he came back to score all the movies.
It would be unwise to question your wisdom.
But I really liked John Barry's score for the movie. I liked the tune, the music, but he hated it, and a lot of critics and fans hated it too. And I'm like, this is one of my favorite original scores for a Bond movie. I mean, the song notwithstanding, but the tune. And
I love the song.
Yeah, the way they use the music throughout the film, I really loved it. But he hated it, and a lot of other people hated it. Maybe sound off in the comments and let us know what you thought. I actually kind of I really love the theme music. So anyway, Bond completes the jump. He takes off, and he comes upon this barn where Scaramanga has driven into the barn. The doors all close, and we see that the Scaramanga presses a couple buttons, and these wings and a propeller attachment latch onto the car. The console changes so that it's got all of his altimeter and his fuel, all that kind of stuff. Then the barn doors open, flapping down wide enough for the wings. This car with the wing attachments on it was 30 feet long, 42 feet wide, and 10 feet high. They were able to drive it down the runway, but of course it wouldn't fly, not for real. And so John Steers built like a model version, like remote control that can fly for the aerial shots. And Bond he gets out of the car, and he's going to sneak into the barn, and J.W. Pepper jumps out of the car, and he gets all excited. We're going to get him. And Bond's like, shut up. And it's odd looking at the getup Sheriff Pepper is in. He's such a total square tourist with he's got the straw hat, he's got the Benihana shirt, the khaki shorts, and socks that are rolled up all the way to like his knees. And I
had a roommate like him.
Yeah, and just about as Bond was about to shoot his way into the barn, the Thai police show up, and Sheriff Pepper's like, "Stand back, boy! I got this handled." And he opens his wallet with all these credentials, and he's going,
"Oh my God,
Louisiana State Police!" And they don't
the Legion, the VFA.
Yeah, they just take the opportunity to cuff him and take his wallet, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And then they turn, and he's like, "What y'all looking at?" And he looks up in the air, and he sees the flying car, but it's so far away at that point that he can only tell that. Well, he's like, "What's the matter? Ain't you ever seen an airplane before?" But of course,
he says something worse than that.
Well, yeah, he does. I'm making a point of not mentioning all the racial slurs that he says. And so the plane. They all, of course, saw it take off from the ground, so they know it's a flying car.
Yes.
And this is funny because after this scene, we don't even see what happens to Sheriff Pepper after this. He's just gone.
Ever again. He is never to return. Goodbye, Sheriff. So
we cut back to the Queen Elizabeth wrecked ship, and Bond has just finished explaining this, and Lieutenant Hip is standing next to him, and M just can't believe it. He's like, of all the complete fuck-ups of an operation.
No, but it is beset on failure. Like every step of the way, aside from finding the bullet and figuring out where to get to the armor. But like when James Bond decides to don himself a nipple, that is when he has put everyone in jeopardy.
Yeah, so M is obviously really pissed off, and Bond's mentioning about the flying car, and he's like, how absurd this is. And Q's like, well, actually, sir, we're working on a prototype. It's actually been done before. And I was like, oh, shut up, Q. And they're trying to figure out where Mary Goodnight is. They can't figure it out. She, meanwhile, has her walkie-talkie with her still. And it is. I agree with Gun to Wunderbaum. The original soundtrack, or the official soundtrack from Golden Gun is the best part of the film. So she opens the trunk of the car because she thinks they've already landed. But she opens it to see that they're, of course, flying through the sky. And she closes herself back up in there. And one of the Navy guys comes in there. He says, "Yeah, well, we pinged her signal and we traced it down to this island chain out here." And so Bond decides that he's going to go and deal with this. And you were mentioning something about Q turning out to be quite intelligent about something earlier.
Well, I don't know. The dynamic between I'm just saying that like Roger Moore's James Bond is always the smartest man in the room. And when Q shows up, he doesn't seem as annoyed with 007. He seems disappointed with him. Q is the only person who is smarter than James Bond.
Yeah.
And so I just think that is the relationship that they have developed into now. And and the only reason I bring it up and highlighted it so much and feel passionately about it is because Desmond Llewellyn, I wouldn't necessarily say is a John Gielgud of acting. He's not necessarily the best actor in the world, but I enjoy his presence and character. And so it does inform the rest of the way. He's getting older. You can see it. And I don't know. He seems more wizardly. He seems more parental, if you will, fatherly.
Yeah. So we cut, and Bond's flying his water plane out there, and he comes to the island, which is of course now a famous tourist destination.
Oh no, I know a lady who went there. She took pictures and everything. It was great. Apparently, it's in Thailand. It's near Phuket.
Yeah, Phuket. So so Bond lands, and it's a neat island because it's like you would almost think it's like too perfect for a set. Like you have the towering the towering crest tower on one side, the towering crest on the other, and then the little sandy beach right in between, perfect for the plane to land. Bond's walking around, and Knick-Knack ends up coming out and greets him again as usual. And
Monsieur.
Yeah, Monsieur. So he of course brings him a whole bottle of champagne, and Bond's about to pour him a glass, but then all of a sudden a gunshot rings out, blasting off the cap of the champagne, and it's Scaramanga popping up from behind a rock. He's like, "Oh, how funny!" And couldn't resist, Mr. Bond. Oh, don't worry, it's harmless. And pours him a drink. He's like, "Oh, I hope you like this." And then he's like, "Oh, let's go in for lunch." So they're starting to walk inside this cave, and apparently when they were filming here, 1,000 bats about came out of this cave when they were walking there with Christopher Lee, and Christopher Lee apparently said in response to this, "Not now, Stanislaw."
Oh, and I am glad that happened during filming, because welcome to the Christopher Lee show. Roger Moore is going to be a prop for the rest of the film because Christopher Lee is here and he is charming and amazing.
Yes, and so and this is neat how he's got his lair, like this whole lounge area, built into the mountain type thing, and he goes in, he takes Bond inside and gives him a tour. There's a whole laboratory, and this I have to say is probably one of the most ridiculous, maybe second to the volcano lair. I'm not sure in terms of practicability of actually building it, given we've seen what the exteriors of this island looks like. We get the scale, but he's got this massive laboratory in there, and this is like a crass limestone type tower. This is not something you can camera into and just massive caves. And when he demonstrates he shows, so basically it's like a solar energy plant, which is all run by one guy. This guy who doesn't talk, and he wears this weird 70s tracksuit. He's got a big afro. He's kind of okay, whatever.
And he loves white women.
Yeah, and so Scaramanga takes Bond up into the tower to show him where the Solux agitator is hooked up to this machine, and basically Scaramanga's evil plan is to sell this technology to the highest bidder. And
which fine.
Yeah, he wants to demonstrate how this works, and Bond's like, "Well, it's great that it's solar powered, but you need the sun. Where are you catching the solar energy from?" And so Scaramanga opens this windscreen, and you see the main tower island, the famous one, right there. And then out of the top of it comes out this big solar panel, and it spreads open to catch. I'm like, there's no goddamn way you would have built that in there, which is why it just seems even more ridiculous. But I guess that's fitting for this film.
Yeah, but it still looks better than the guys on fire in Diamonds Are Forever.
That's true. So it catches the sunlight, and then Scaramanga has this giant laser gun, it looks like, and he aims it at Bond's airplane and blasts it to pieces with the solar energy. And he's like, "See, Mr. Bond, now I truly am the man with the golden gun." And it's funny because the whole time he's taking Bond through the tour, he's trying to explain the science, and he doesn't really know it. He's like, "Yeah, science was never really my strong suit." So again, he's a total show off. Again.
Well, yeah, but okay. So in terms of Scaramanga's plan, what is it?
So so this is the thing. So High Fat hired him to he basically wanted the Solux agitator for himself, but they killed him. Scaramanga double crossed him and made sure that Knick-Knack would get the Solux agitator instead. Scaramanga apparently has been using the funds from this from all of his kills to establish this base, and he's been in league with High Fat doing this, which is why all this equipment is on this island. And apparently now that he is killed, because I forgot to mention, that's right, Scaramanga killed High Fat because High Fat was reconsidering their agreement, and he says, like, I don't know if this was a good idea hiring you now that Mr. Bond's on to us, and blah blah blah. And Scaramanga was assembling what looked like, innocently enough, a pen, a lighter, and a cartridge, and which apparently in real life was very hard to assemble for Christopher Lee, and it, of course, was the Golden Gun. And he killed High Fat and just told his secretary or whatever, oh, High Fat always loved that mausoleum over there. Why don't you put him in it? And now taking his place on the board of directors or whatever. So the implication is that because High Fat is dead and because Scaramanga is, pretty rich, they're going to let him stay on the board of High Fat's company, his energy company. And now that way, so he can facilitate what he's been building here, and then he can continue selling that tech to the highest bidder or whatever. So it's not exactly, it's not really an evil plan or a diabolical plan by any means. It's just that Scaramanga's an asshole. And
well, and a murderer. Let's not forget, he's a murderer.
Yeah, he's a murderer and he's an asshole, and that's pretty much it. There's not much to. There really is no grand villain plot in this film, I should say.
No, it seems that he wants to provide solar energy to the highest bidder, which is, hey.
Yeah, he's just going to make money off of it. I mean, it's not exactly evil, but...
late stage capitalism, yo.
Yeah, so Knick Knack suddenly chimes in with the dinner bell. He gets the triangle, and he dings it out next to the speaker, or next to the microphone, and Scaramanga's like, oh, that's the dinner bell. So they go back into the main lounge area and sit at this long table, and Mary Goodnight walks in, and she's in this really skimpy bikini, and Scaramanga's like, oh, I like a girl in a bikini. She can't hide any weapons. And they sit down at the table, and Bond's kind of being cheeky with her, and she's like, oh, yes, I could just stay here forever, She obviously doesn't like it there and is upset with him. And so Scaramanga that gets into it with Bond, where he's talking at the table, and he's talking about how, oh, Mr. Bond, you kill people. We both kind of kill people. We're really good at it. I sit down, yeah, you do it just for a little tap on the shoulder and a thank you very much. Whereas I do it for millions of dollars and, get a living large and all of that stuff. And Bond really, you could tell, feels very genuinely insulted by this.
Yeah.
And really, probably, it seems angrier with the villain than I've seen in much any of the other Roger Moore films. Because he really makes a point of saying that when I kill, I do it for Queen and Country, and I kill killers.
Well, and also, it is a conversation, and I know that this is heavy on the Roger Moore era of James Bond, is that I do feel a duty when it comes to Roger Moore's James Bond. I do feel that he works for Her Majesty's government.
Right, and that's kind of what he's really stressing here, which is why he got really offended when Scaramanga said that. And he's like, Scaramanga kind of brushes him off, and then he just pours himself a glass, and he holds it up. He's like, to us, Mr. Bond, we are the best. To which Bond's like, I can think of a little four-letter word, and you're full of it. And then it cuts to Mary Goodnight, and she kind of gives Scaramanga the look. She's like worried that it's about to hit it. And Scaramanga, you can tell, is kind of offended by it, and so he kind of cuts lunch short and says, "Oh, let's go outside. Let's get started on this." So they're gonna have a standoff, a classic duel, as it seems, on the beach. And Knick Knack,
I am your referee.
Yes, he's going to count to 20.
I wish Bunyan Snipe was here. He does such a better Knick Knack than I do.
He does. So Knick Knack is standing on this great rock. He's got his hands behind him. He's got his bowler hat on, or his hat on, and he's like, "Okay, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
8, 9, 50.
Yeah, and so Bond and Scaramanga are back to back, walking further away as the tension's building. He's like 11, 12. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And then they spin around, and Bond spins around and shoots, but Scaramanga's gone. Now, in the trailers, this was an extended segment where they actually trade barbs at each other, but they cut it because they thought it went on too long and was affecting the pacing.
Okay.
Bond is looking around, he can't find him, and he starts snooping around the island, and eventually he pops into Knick Knack around a corner and nearly shoots him, and Knick Knack's like, monsieur, if you kill him, all of this be mine. And Bond's like, I've never killed a midget before, but there's always a first time. He's like, oh, monsieur. And so he leads him back into the building, and Knick Knack goes off into his little side control room while Bond is kind of once again falls into the same trap that Rodney did at the beginning of the movie, and he finds himself locked into this funhouse. Except this time, Bond is a little bit more savvy to the tricks and traps, and he gets it past the gangsters. He gets past the cowboy thing, and at one point he drops his gun and he's climbing through kind of the rafters behind the effect. So he's kind of seeing how this funhouse works. And to be honest,
meanwhile, in the power plant,
yes,
something happens.
Yeah, Craw is basically put in charge of watching Mary Goodnight, and
he does.
Yeah, he's monitoring the panels or whatever, and she can hear she heard when the first gunshot went off on the beach, and that's when Craw turned off the radio so she couldn't hear it anymore, and he starts caressing her, and it's like, okay, this is really weird. And so and we'll get to the comments in a minute. So Bond,
Pardon me.
not Bond, but Goodnight at one point decides that she finds a way to get the best of Craw. She kind of hits him he has to go tend to something on the panel because his light starts beeping or whatever. And she grabs something like a pole and hits him over the head, and he falls into one of the main vats there. And
okay. So anyway, so this is one of the most hilarious things that I've noticed this ever since Diamonds Are Forever. Every layer, they have incredible safety signs. I remember on the oil rig on Blofeld's oil rig on Diamonds Are Forever, it says, if you don't know, ask, which is like a good topic. Like that's something you should tell your employees. That's a thing. That's good. It encourages questions. This one, this says, please, there's only one guy who works here, and it says keep these at absolute 0 or everything will blow up.
Yeah, so she doesn't pay attention to that. So she just hits him on the head. She didn't hit him very hard, but he just like knocked out like and he falls into the big vat and is meat frozen, turned into ice, and then goes in there. So he's gonna start falling apart. And meanwhile, in the funhouse, Scaramanga didn't hear this, and I gotta say, this is one of the other letdowns is how the fight kind of ends. It doesn't really. It feels like it's going to maybe build to something, but it doesn't have the same type of pizzazz as the beginning where you didn't really know what was going on. Because you would think that because they're going back to the funhouse that they would show you different aspects of it, but they don't. They take you through the same bits you saw in the pre-title sequence. So eventually you get to the moment where Scaramanga is marching around looking for Bond. He's got the golden gun, and he passes the wax statue, but he doesn't notice that the 4 fingers are nearly held down like this instead of being shot off. And like I said, it's Bond. He's taken the place of the wax statue and spins and shoots Scaramanga in the heart. And Scaramanga lives just long enough to realize how he's been beaten.
Which I thought, that look of shock is absolute. I liked it.
Oh, it's amazing. It is amazing. It just felt, the way it ended just felt a little bit anticlimactic for some reason. So
because there's still like 15 minutes of movie.
Right, and then not just because there's more left of the movie, it just didn't feel like a grandiose end to this fight. I mean, I was much more excited at the idea of them doing a quick draw on the beach, or the showdown there than when they get in the funhouse. It just felt like, and again, it was kind of like I predicted that from the beginning of the movie that was going to happen. It's like, okay. Also, because there aren't really any villainous plan, it doesn't really feel like a triumph. It's like, okay, you shot him. And like you said, the better actor of the film is gone now.
Yeah.
So, Mary Goodnight suddenly runs in the room.
Oh, wait, no. Knick-Knack will be back.
So Mary Goodnight runs in. Oh, that's right. And so anyway, Mary Goodnight runs in the room, and even though she's like, where's Scaramanga? And even though he's lying right there, for some reason she can't see him, and he's like, oh, he felt full of shit, and so, or it felt.
And Britt Eklund wanted to play this role.
Yeah. So they start fleeing, but they need to get the Solex agitator first. So they go back to the tower. And Bond, for some reason, instead of having her go down below in the small, tight area which she could easier fit through to get the Solex while he manages the control panel, he instead decides to go down in there and have her do the control panel. So she's
always been technically adept so far.
Kind of, but
no, not at all. I'm being facetious. Continue.
I know. I'm just wondering why the facetiousness here. So anyway, Bond is yelling at her, and she's like getting upset. He's like, good night, kind of, again being very dismissive of her, wanting her to fix this. And so eventually she just presses all the buttons, and one that she presses is it doesn't even. Well, this is odd. He presses all the buttons.
Eventually she just presses all the buttons,
but it doesn't do anything. What ends up happening is that the clouds pass between the sun, causing a temporary lapse in power. And even though there would be enough stocks of solar energy built up that it shouldn't require that immediate bit for the laser to work, but the laser immediately goes off. Bond lodges the agitator loose, and then the laser beam shows back up because the sun's shining again. He freaks out. He's mad at her again, and so they take off. And this is where you have the mandatory villain-based explosion scene. And
yes,
everything's blowing to. Apparently, Britt Eklund was kind of worried about filming this, as were other people. She's got to wear this skimpy bikini while they're running around setting off all these explosive squibs of the debris and all that.
I remember hearing, like reading somewhere on the internet, so it must be true, that people actually suffered burns. Like I thought that Britt Eklund was licked by flames.
She was. She did say that. She's like, yeah, it's not like my bum nearly caught on fire, but you can feel it while you're running through because all these stuff is exploding everywhere. Which again, they build the stuff and blow it to pieces, and then they combined that with miniatures because of course the entire island gets blown to smithereens. While Mary Goodnight and Bond make out on take off on Scaramanga's ship, which is a moment they don't actually show, surprisingly enough. You show them like running towards. It's like all of a sudden you see the island blowing up, and then it cuts to them just on the boat.
Yeah, no, Mary does say, she's like, oh no, I know where Scaramanga's junk is.
Oh, yeah,
and it's like...
yeah, more ways than one. So they get on the boat, they're sailing away, and they're finally going to have a time in bed, and she's kind of forgiven him for all of his other douchebag moments throughout the movie. And they're making out, and she's kind of happy, and then all of a sudden, in a very weird bit, Knick Knack comes through the ceiling, and she screams, like, ah! And Knick Knack falls from above with a knife in his mouth. And this is a scene where...
Miss you, I win.
It's a scene that's so ridiculous that they realized that they could not spoof it in Austin Powers 3, so they just recreated the scene verbatim pretty much.
Yeah. Oh, and also, like, I was so happy. I kind of wished that Knick Knack had won that fight. I don't like Roger Moore in this movie. So when he shows back up, and then Roger Moore puts him in a suitcase, right?
Yes, so he it's funny because at first he stabs him on the bed, he can't get to him, and so Knick Knack runs under the small the small table and kicks Bond in like the groin or whatever. Then he runs under this little bench against the wall, and I guess there must be a secret compartment because he disappears and shows back up in the mini bar, and he picks up all the bottles off the wall, starts throwing at him, and then Bond eventually picks up his big suitcase and he locks Knick Knack inside. And you hear him shouting things like, I'm going to get you, I'm going to kill you. And
I'll kill you. I'll kill you, you son bitch.
And so, maybe you small, I never forget. Hey,
Anyway.
And then Bond eventually says, shut up.
Yeah.
What sounded like a very American type accent. And so.
Yeah, he does. And you know what? I did notice that for all of the gentleman posturing that Roger Moore does, I don't think I'd ever heard. Like, it was a very facetious shut up. I didn't like it.
It sounded like something that another actor did to do an impersonation of Roger Moore's voice. Like maybe they didn't have him available on the day. But so they have him, locked in the case, and Bond comes back in to meet Goodnight, and she's like, oh, James, you didn't. Please tell me you didn't. And he's like, you bet I damn well did. And I'm thinking, well, why would you care, Goodnight? You were just freaking out because he was coming down on the ceiling with a knife, probably going to stab you. Why would you care about the implication of Bond potentially killing this guy? But
I'm gonna go Clamp from Gremlins 2 and be like, you know what I see? I see little knickknacks with suction cups on their hands. They just stick to windows and they look everywhere. They're adorable.
And so Bond asks her if she got all the glass cleared out of the bed, and she's like, oh yes. And they finally lie in bed and start making out, and the phone starts ringing. It rises out of the floor, and she's like, what is it, James? He's like, oh, something's just come up. And she's the phone. He picks it up, and M is congratulating Bond. And who knows why M has the phone number to Scaramanga's personal bedside phone, but okay.
Let's chalk it up to intelligence. It's British intelligence.
Yeah, so he's happy about it, and M wants to, which is a very change in tune, because at one point in the movie, M even said, oh, I wish Scaramanga's contract was for you, because that way Gibson wouldn't have been killed. And again, I've never really quite understood why Bernard Lee's relationship with M, or relationship with Bond, is so adversarial compared to, and so like callous compared to the other M's, but it just is. And so
so there was a quiet contempt between, and also a respect between Connery and Bernard Lee in terms of their M Bond dynamic. Mm-hmm. And then I think Bernard Lee made way for George Lazenby, but by the time Roger Moore shows up, I think Bernard Lee is like, oh, it's you.
Yeah, because then he wants to talk to Mary Goodnight, and Bond's like, okay, just a minute, sir. And he puts the phone down. They keep making out. M's waiting. And he's like, where's Goodnight? And Bond's like, oh, she's just coming, sir. And he sets it down. And then he's like,
she's just coming.
Yeah, exactly. And so M's like, good night. And Bond picks up the phone. And he's like, good night, sir. And he hangs up on him. And then they keep making out, and then we cut outside to reveal that Knick-Knack was not killed or thrown into the ocean in the luggage, but he's been put in this basket cage and hoisted up on the sail. And he's
Hey, I live, monsieur. I live.
looking a bit despondent, and looking despondent, and that's the end of The Man with the Golden Gun.
It is. They sail off into the sunset and the next adventure.
Yes,
which
Promise of You Will Return and Spy Who Loved Me.
The Spy Who Loved Me. Yes. My God, I can't wait.
So this movie definitely, as we've went over, has all sorts of ridiculous stuff in it. But I think that it's interesting because Tom Mankiewicz said the first draft of the script that he wrote, it was the Solex agitator wasn't even in it, and it was more of a battle of wills between Bond and Scaramanga. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. But he seemed to think that it wasn't his best stuff, and voluntarily left the project and was replaced by Richard Maybaum. And that's when Michael G. Wilson came on board to help Maybaum, and they came up with the whole Solex agitator thing. And I'm thinking, how could you, when you got Christopher Lee in this role, how could you not think that a battle of wills between Bond and Scaramanga would be a good thing? Like, why'd you feel the need for this weird prop? Because again, it doesn't even feel like it needs to be in the story, because the contrivance of Gibson just happening to be at the Bottoms Up Club and targeted by Scaramanga and Bond being there is just like, you could tell this is something that they didn't think too hard about how to inject this MacGuffin into the story. It's like, I want to say that he was there, and it's just, here it is. And the fact that, again, it made sense probably in the first draft script for Scaramanga to have a bungalow or whatever on this island, but the fact that they shoehorned in this whole lab for solar power and the way that none of it fits on the island or makes any sense, again, feels like something they just kind of slapped on there because they didn't really take any time thinking about how this MacGuffin and subplot would fit into the story. It's just kind of there. And so I feel that it's a missed opportunity in that sense. And again, we already went over all the ridiculous stuff about it. However, I do like the initial main plot of the story. The idea that Bond has sort of been, shanghaied into dealing with this renowned international assassin, and you find out that it's just his mistress. And I feel that this is a movie. I mean, admittedly, they redid it again in Skyfall and another version of it. But I feel
you could say that this is somewhat reminiscent of From Russia with Love.
Yeah, it is a bit. And I like how it feels a bit like an espionage type plot, even though it's completely watered down with all of this goofiness, even though because of...
No, he does a lot of James Bond things in the beginning of the movie, but then he just falls down a drain.
Right. All of the heavy plot stuff happens in like the first 48 minutes or so. Yeah. The rest of it is like chase scene and goofiness, but I love Christopher Lee and Hervé Villechaize. They're probably one of my favorite Bond villain duos in the whole series, because they're just like fun characters you would love to have at a dinner party, maybe. Or maybe Knick-Knack. I don't know about Scaramanga. He's a bit of a pompous ass. But and you can tell that they definitely used his personality as the basis for Al Silva. But it's like it just feels like the story that what could have been, even though I do have a soft spot for this movie. And because I like the villain, I do enjoy it probably as much, maybe a little more than Live and Let Die. I do enjoy it a little bit more, but again, there's no real villainous plot. It's kind of awkward the way it all tries to come together, and it's like I'm not really sure what they're trying to accomplish, and maybe it's a symptom of them going too fast, like waiting barely a year before they started, preliminary shooting for this. I don't know, but I find that it's a memorable film. It's better than Diamonds, better than. I think it might be a little bit better to watch than most people give it credit for, just because it feels like so hokey and weird, but because it's entertaining, even though it was a Bond film, it's not, a bit of the lessers. And you could tell that, like I mentioned at the beginning, it's like Harry Saltzman, the movie. I mean, it all feels like vintage Harry. And by this point, of course, this would be, of course, his last Bond film, because he was in so much debt by that time that he had to sell his half of the interest in the franchise to Cubby to get out of it.
Good old Canadian boy, that Harry Saltzman.
But this is a fun movie. I kind of enjoy it. I love those two guys, and you're right. Roger Moore isn't really being Bond. He's being kind of a jerk to Mary Goodnight the whole time, and a bit aggressive.
100,000 baht.
Oh, I forgot that. I looked it up. It was 20,000 baht.
Pardon me.
And that was, so during the boat chase, the kid is trying to sell the elephant to him, and Bond says, "Look, kid, I'll give you 20,000. Well, first it's funny, because first the kid wants like 100, and then Bond won't take it. So he's like, 80 for you, sir. 40 because you're handsome. And Bond's like, tell you what, I'll give you 20,000 if you can get this boat moving. And all he had to do was like flip the switch, which again, Bond should be smart enough to know how to do that. Kind of like in No Time to Die, when Bond just hits all the switches for the old missile silo. Whereas here, Bond, for some reason, couldn't figure out how to flip a simple switch for a motor. And the kid's like, 20,000 baht. And I understand this is a scene that Roger Moore didn't like, pushing the kid out of the boat.
Mm-hmm.
It felt more like a weird, not a Bondian type thing, I guess. Which is weird that he would speak out about this than not say the way he treats Miss Anders.
Oh, no. I would never abuse a child. But would I break a woman's arm? I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe.
and so I looked it up. 20,000 baht is the equivalent of about $600.
Oh, well.
Bond.
It's overpriced. I would kick the child out of my boat as well.
Well, if you're James Bond, you probably got a lot of money because I'll bring it up.
He
At
had
some
just
point.
escaped from a karate school. He didn't have his wallet.
That's true. Well, you didn't have to go to a wall. You could have taken him back to the MI6 and say, "Hey, give this kid $600."
Or you can throw the child overboard. I think it's a cost-effective choice.
Yeah. So so what did you think of this film, Scotty?
I really enjoy it. I think it is. I remembered it, as you said before, in terms of being the sort of kung fu equivalent to the blaxploitation film that was Live and Let Die. And then I realized that it had Christopher Lee in it. And when I watched the opening of it, I was like, wow, Maude Adams, heavens. Britt Eklund, heavens. Christopher Lee, my stars. Hervé, wow. And Roger Moore's here. So I agree with you. You know, when you say that it is better than Diamonds Are Forever, I agree with you. Where did I put Goldfinger? I gave Goldfinger an 8. I'm not going to go that high. Yeah, no, I'm going to put this. This is a 5 because it's better than Live and Let Die. But it has nothing to do with Roger Moore.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 6 because to me, I enjoy it as much as Live and Let Die, even though Live and Let Die has a better story, but I think that Christopher Lee kind of compensates for there not being as much of a story in here because, like I said, like you were mentioning, he's just too good.
He's too good.
And it's just enjoyable, but yeah, I give it a 6, even though it does rank rather high on my Bond list.
Okay.
I would almost rank it higher than, even though I gave Thunderball a higher rating as being a better movie and a better Bond plot, I almost enjoy watching this movie more.
It has been a long time since I've seen this movie, and it had been a long time since I'd seen Thunderball, but I think I'd go back to Thunderball before I went back to this.
That's true. So I'm going to give this one also a 6, like Live and Let Die.
Cool.
6 martinis.
6 martinis. No half. Just here for the olives. All right. Shall we see what's going on in the chat and then call it a day?
Yeah.
All right. Captain Cockney Spock is here. He says, unreliable narrator.
Not in this film.
Not in this film. I rely on everyone in this film. And actually, it's not really a trope that comes up in Bond. Agreed. Gundel Whittlebaum? Yep. Nipples. Glorious third nipples.
Something, interestingly enough, was Christopher Lee said is not as much of an oddity as the film would lead you to believe. I'm thinking, really?
Well, and I know I don't want to get into it right now because we're sort of wrapping, but there has been some concern about the Bond villains with the physical deformities, and they consider this to be a physical deformity. I don't think this is a deformity. It's more of like an individual oddity.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a guy
for another time.
Yeah. Anyway, so yes, but still, if you have 3 nipples, you have one more than I. Gundel continues, Kat retells Bond storylines so well, she could be sued by Broccoli for copyright infringement.
Oh, thank you so much, Gundel Whittlebaum.
Connery Bond enjoys smacking chicks around, whereas Moore Bond does so knowing a gentleman doesn't smack a lady. Moore gave Bond a classiness the book Bond had in spades.
Yeah, I get what he means by that because he's right. Because Connery, when he would slap people around, like I mentioned, he'd be very aggressive and angry. Whereas Roger's Bond does it almost like in the gentlemanly type way, which is admittedly very weird, but it does match that type of weird classiness in the book, which is again part of the reason why you don't see Fleming's Bond books in bookstores anymore. I don't know when.
Sorry, can I tell you a brief story about James Bond books in Canada?
Sure.
They're out of copyright. They are public domain.
That's awesome.
We should make a James Bond movie. We can make any James Bond movie we want. It's in public domain.
We totally should.
Call Bunyan Snipe. We'll do Moonraker. We'll fill it.
Not kidding.
We'll film it in Aurelia. Tim's talk says,
Hey, Tim.
The Golden Gun was OP in the GoldenEye Nintendo 64 game. Absolutely.
Yes,
That's how.
That was a great prop that they put that in the Egyptian temple bonus level where you have to get to the Golden Gun and it kills anybody in one shot, just like it does in the movie.
He's got a powerful weapon.
Except in that game, you have to kill Baron Samedi with it instead of Scaramanga.
Would you like to do a knick-knack impression, or may I?
You do it.
I win, monsieur. So then Gundel says, Moore always seemed like the racist Bond. I think that comes from Moore himself. Well, he was a UN ambassador, Gundel. Let's not go casting aspersions.
And on that note, in terms of the whole conversation of whether it's more of Bond, Roger being Roger Moore instead of being Bond, I admit I've not actually seen Roger Moore in much of anything outside of Bond. I've heard about a lot of the roles and seen clips. And I know from his book that I got down here, Bond on Bond, that he does have that same Roger Moore-esque type cheekiness to it. But I wouldn't know. I mean, the script, because, to be fair, the J.W. Pepper character says a lot of racial slurs in this movie, too. So it's coming from the script.
Well, I don't even know what they mean. Like,
What do you
mean? I don't get it.
I have some ideas.
Is it the hats?
It could be that a lot of them have. I have to go back and double check the meaning, but I think it.
Like, I'm not all that interested. I just don't get it. It's like I don't even understand how I'm supposed to be offended.
Yeah, we'll find. Well, but the good thing is that this isn't a critical race theory class, so we're not going to bother figuring that out. It's just clear that
it is of its time. It is of its time.
In the context of the scene, he's clearly saying it as an insult towards the Thai people.
Oh yeah, it's a slur for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, Gundel goes on. The original soundtrack for The Man with the Golden Gun is likely the best part of the film. Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. And then Tiki Fire's Retro Clubhouse says Moore's Bond always was the smartest guy in the room, which is why it's hilarious when Q gets so frustrated with him. And yeah, I really appreciated that sort of the evolution of Q's character as well.
Well, I thought in this movie in particular, in certain scenes, Q seems smarter than Bond.
Yeah, which is why it's hilarious when Q gets so frustrated with him, because Q is smarter and he's frustrated with how dumb Bond is. But everyone else in the movie thinks Bond is a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
Even Scaramanga is like, I don't know how these things work, Mr. Bond. But Q is like, don't you know how to change a spark plug, 007? So it's great. It's great. And then, last but not least, again, Tiki Fire's Retro Clubhouse says Christopher Lee is a better Bond than Roger Moore in this movie.
Yes, that's true. He has the charm, the charisma, the suave, he's debonair, he's intimidating, lethal. It's like, man, if this were another time, you could have cast him maybe to play Bond.
If this were, like, again, if we were just rating Christopher Lee movies, this is like a 10.
Oh, easily.
Yeah. If you like Christopher Lee, watch this movie. Everything else. And you know what? You get a side of Hervé.
A side of Hervé.
And then Gundel says, remember, Scotty, your Bond film can't use anything from any of the films. You can only use details from the books. Movie could only show in Canada as well. No, Gundel's a Canadian. He understands how to, we could subvert things, but there's going to be no gun barrel. There's going to be no like James Bond theme. Actually, you know what? It sounds like our James Bond movie would be unsuccessful. Thanks, Gundel. Anyway.
Well, we can smuggle the Bond film across the border and play it in other film. We'll put on these disguises and no one's going to be able to see us. And we'll go around showing the movie and intimidating people like this and say, "Here, watch our movie."
They started as James Bond fans and they turned into villains. Oh, we are all 006. Anyway, so yeah, you got anything else, lady?
No, I think that's as the way we covered it. That's a
Sounds good.
yeah.
Well, as usual, and as always, James Bond will return. Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns will return. Yeah, we'll see you next week for Heaven Above Me.
The Spy Who Loved Me.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
Ha ha ha.
You know, the best part is I left the stream. I'm driving. I can't just jump out of the car.